Okay, so we're going to get started with this, and as people pop in, our sales, Carrie, is helping us admit people, which is great.
Hi, Carrie.
And so, factory audit basics. For the agenda, we'll do some introductions so you can understand who's on the team here and who would benefit from this, target audience, a little bit about viewpoint of factories versus product designers, and why do an audit. A lot of people don't do audits or visits. Some examples of problems avoided with audits, how to ask the factory to get an invitation, because sometimes they're a little nervous about us showing up. I've got some checklist topics. Yeah, you know that. Checklist topics that I always ask, and it's a minimum list. This is a overview type thing. And then other things I'm looking for while I'm doing the checklist. I like to leave enough time to observe, and we'll talk about that more.
Mm-hmm.
Factory etiquette, they have their lunch breaks and break times. And this is a big one. It's a little outside of audits, but acceptance criteria versus golden sample. And then we'll leave some time for Q&A. So let's go on. Introductions. I'd like to introduce, she's hiding over here. She needs to come over in the camera a bit. Sandra Xie from Taiwan.
Hi.
And
Hello.
We both have a tech background, and you can see from this slide here that we've crossed paths in recent years. When I was at Texas Instruments, I supported them for DLP projectors, and she was working at Cortronic in sales. I was working with the engineers inside the company, and we probably walked by each other in the hallways and didn't know it.
Right.
It wasn't until we went to Pervasive Displays in southern Taiwan and worked that we met each other and worked together. And now here we are both at Lone Star. So Taiwan is Sandra's based here in Dallas. I'm based in Taiwan. We have switched countries. So she's helping with business development, and I'm over there on the factory side. So the things that I've learned at companies like Texas Instruments, I've packaged it to help smaller companies benefit from that, going in, assessing factories, having discussions with them for acceptance criteria, planning, pricing, quality issue, inspections, packaging, shipping. Now, we're actually doing a lot of import and export and shipping these days. That's a new skill that we've added over this past couple of years. And I guess the big thing to remember about Lone Star is that we don't hide any of the communications. We open it up. We'll have a Google Meet right there as we're checking things and let clients see everything that's going on. Because we think that transparency is good. Customers know their products very well, and if there's something we have missed, they know it. Customers know their products. So some of our current clients, my largest one is Foresight Helmet Systems. We're assembling a smart motorcycle helmet in New Taipei City. I've opened a factory just for that product. We've got a swim device from EO Labs out of Australia. We have some low-tech things like Sock Fort, construction socks. We do some work for SHL Medical, some smart locks, remote lock. Taitoma is a design house, and then even some permanent makeup products with Beauty Slash. That's just some of our clients. We actually have a few more that I need to update the slide with. Target audience. Who will benefit from understanding basics of factory audits? Definitely product developers. You may not see this, but I would also suggest that factory owners would benefit from understanding what customers should be looking for. Supply chain management teams. Another one that can use the concepts, maybe not in as much detail, are the white labelers. These are the folks that are buying off of Amazon and they're putting their name on it, or they're asking for minor changes. But then from batch to batch, they're getting something a little bit different. If they apply supply chain management concepts to their work, they can also have more consistency. This is something that, I was talking to a customer the other day, and getting them into a factory to get a design change to a product that isn't that complicated, but for a factory is still a change. It's a big deal for them. They have to put R&D on it. They have to do change control notices. They have to repeat their reliability testing. It is a big deal. And the customer asked me, he goes, is it always this hard to get into a factory? And I said, yes, it is. It is hard. It's hard to do. Product development is hard. Changing is hard. And product developers over here on the right, I've put in red, are innovative, they change, they need to be profitable, and they're usually looking for some funding. Factories are slow and steady. They want stability. They have to deal with ordering materials. So that is, product developers and factories are on opposite sides, but they have a common goal. How do you bridge that? So why audit? Number one reason is, for me, and even if I have no intention of visiting them, I will say, can I come visit you? And the answer will be yes, or no. And then I'll say, well, why not? And they say, well, the factory isn't here, or maybe they're busy with something. There could be very valid reasons why the factory can't host you for a visit, but it's a way for me to determine if they are a factory or a trading company. If they are a trading company, they probably cannot control what the factory is doing. So that could be a problem. It usually is. Sometimes trading companies are quite useful and it can work out, but just keep in mind that the trading company really can't control what the factory does. You'll get what you get. During the project, should go check on them and see how they're doing and see if they need anything, or send someone to go check on them and see what's needed. It's like managing a team. You can't just say one time what you want. You have to keep repeating and asking and making sure that everybody is still marching the same direction, or you will lose them. They'll go off into the weeds. So very famously, you can find lots of companies that do final inspection for you. That's okay, but that's really too late. It's good to do that, but at the same time, say you don't want the product and you reject it at final inspection. If you don't want it and you say, I'm not going to take it, I'm not going to pay for this, the factory's lost a lot of money. And the next time you order, they may not take your order, or they may take your order and increase the prices a lot to pay for that last order that they had to not ship to you. So you really want the factory to not have to wait until the end to fix something. If you can, the earlier in the process that you can get in there and see what's going on, the quicker you can recover from it. So you want it to be win-win. And it's complex. The factory has a hard job of ordering all these materials between batches, especially small batches, and trying to keep them consistent is not easy. So I always say final inspection, that's too late. Get there earlier. You could still go, but Now, initial contact. I think in my experience, I have a company that is working with a factory that is difficult. And from day one, they really didn't set out what they expected. They didn't give them clear acceptance criteria. And now that they've gotten this inspection, it's not going well, they want to reject things. So what's happening is they're raising the price, or they're threatening them with not taking an order, which could actually crush a business if you have one supplier. So getting expectations on the table and understanding their business practices, what they expect, and trying to find some compromise early on is the most important thing when working with a factory. It doesn't matter how small or large a project is. There's, during the project, you're going to see cost, schedules, quality changes. It's just going to happen as products go into life. Once they place that order, they get the materials in, then something has happened, could happen. You just really have to keep an eye on it. I've got one PCBA project that is, it went from $25 to $150 for the same PCBA. And so we started looking at every single little part and figuring out where it was, and then seeing what things can we buy ourselves in order to bring that cost back down. So it's, you really need to spend time to know how your product is made. Don't, it is something that a product developer can benefit from, to spend some time at the factory, see what's going on, check all the stations, how they put it together, not for the purpose of moving it somewhere else. Sometimes factories are afraid of this, but the more that you understand your product, the more that you're going to be able to communicate good acceptance criteria. So again, final inspection, I see this over and over again, where people say they want to reject it, and they say, okay, now what? Now what? I've got all this product and it's customized for you. What am I going to do with it? You get angry factories and angry customers. This is unusual. When you visit a factory, do they want you to come there? I mean, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Maybe they want to sell you more things. They see some positive benefit and they say, well, if you're here, then we can talk to you more about the other things that we're doing. If you are going to a factory where the main language is Chinese or Vietnamese, I recommend that you take someone with you who speaks the language. The Lone Star team speaks the languages for sure. But if you, of course, not having us, make sure you bring someone with you who speaks the languages, because you want that person to hear everything that's being said, not just what they tell you. In the meeting, sometimes, and it may not even be intentional, but they are communicating what they know how to communicate in their second language. And you'll lose some things. You will lose some things. There'll be some misunderstandings. So having someone who can operate in the native language is important. Why wouldn't they want you to visit them? Reasons could be they're not a factory. That happens. Maybe I've got one customer that owes some money to a factory. They don't want to see them. And so there could be financial reasons for that. It could be that they're busy. They have something running and they may have another client on site. And so they need to coordinate that. And some just aren't used to it, especially in the low-tech areas. Low-tech companies don't expect it. So, I'm going to ask Sandra a question here. She worked at Cortronic, and everybody knows that Dell,
Oh, yeah.
Dell, I supported that project. And so Dell, had their projectors made by Cortronic.
Right.
And they always sent people, right?
Yeah.
So
They did. Yeah.
why did they send them? Why did they go visit you guys?
They check everything.
Yeah, you check everything.
Yeah.
So even though a company, is good as Cortronic, and they are great, they have quality systems, they're ISO certified, you still need someone who has your interest at heart to go there. And it doesn't matter if it's a big company. Of course, big companies can do a lot more of this, but small companies can benefit from this too. Somebody who knows your product and has your interest at heart. Okay, let's get into checklist. I have checklist, and to me, it's not important what format it's in. It's more about going and asking questions and getting to know them. Of course, the first things that you want to know about is just their, the local name, their address, and if they have an org chart. If they don't have an org chart, try and map that out and understand who's who. Who is the boss? Who is your production manager? Who's your quality control? Who's your sales contact? And even understanding their main products. I had a client who asked me to do an audit, and they were wanting an assembly factory, and they sent me to a factory that mainly does PCBAs. They have a little bit of assembly, but 95% is SMT PCBAs. So they're probably not a good candidate for assembly, especially on a complicated product. So get an idea, does your product match what they're doing? Or is it something new? If it's something new, that's fine, but understand there's a little bit of risk, and you need to put in some extra checkpoints in there to make sure that they can do it and that they're testing it. Also understanding their major markets. That can tell you a lot about a company. Do they sell into the Americas, or are they mainly in other countries? Get their business license number. You can Google that and you can understand the factory license, who owns the company, when it was established. I went to a factory and I was looking at a 40-year-old factory, but when I Googled the business license number, it was 2 years old. So when I visited, they told me that was their name and that was their number, but it turns out it was a mismatch. Was there anything wrong with that? You know, why they would not tell me the truth about that, I'm not sure, but it made me suspicious. It turned out it was a brother-sister relationship, but I would have preferred the truth. That would have been nice, because it makes me wonder about other things that they won't tell me the truth about, thinking it's a better idea. I need factories to tell me the truth, even if it's not pleasant. So how many employees? You know, or does it make sense? What are the job roles? Do they have all of these disciplines covered? Are there managers, production people, QC, design, English-speaking sales, English-speaking engineers? That's great. Foreign labor. If they are relying heavily on foreign labor, it also shows that they're probably not spending enough money in the local market, right? They're hiring a cheaper labor. There may be some problems with stability in the company if they have excess percentage of foreign labor. Are they willing to do any second shifts, third shifts, overtime? How long have people been there? If I ask how long someone has been there and they tell me 2 months, they probably don't know so much about the company yet. How do they manage turnover at Chinese New Year? You know, in China, when I was over there, I haven't been there since before COVID, but it's very common for companies to have 30 to 85% turnover after Chinese New Year. And so they have these phenomenal training programs at some of these factories to bring new people online very quickly. That's how they deal with it. I don't know what I would do at Texas Instruments if we had 35% turnover. That's just not something we have. Ask about their lead times and why, which parts have the long lead times. Their peak months and slow months. That could be handy. That could help you decide when you want to place an order with them in order to get faster service. Plus their average order size, understanding how, are they a small company or a medium-sized company or large? So going on to the facility, they'll take you on a tour, walk around. Does everything have its place? In a beautiful ISO type factory, everything will be taped off and have its perfect spot. Is that necessary? Probably not, but there does need to be some sort of organization and cleanliness inside the factory in order to get you a good product. Cable factories are probably the exception to that. Working environment. Is it well lit? Can people see what's going on? Do they look content? Are they okay? Or are there angry people running around and shouting? Any of that stuff going on is a problem. Maintenance of the production equipment. In facilities, look for records. There will be records. Ask to take photos. Every piece of equipment should have some sort of maintenance record with a date on it. See how that's coming along. And look for any quality systems. There should be some whiteboards in there showing, you know, how many units they're processing a day, how many are not passing. Another thing that I didn't put on this slide is I look for extra buckets of stuff. So fallout from the line. There's always should be a bucket that may be empty or it may have some parts in it. Those are parts that didn't pass on the line and someone needs to check them out later and understand the root cause. If the bucket's full, then they're probably going to stop the line. So check every machine that you have that is used for your product or even outside your product. Understand how many operators can use that machine. Look at calibration records. The more you can learn, the better it is for you. And while you're there, you're showing the interest in being involved with it. They do appreciate that. You get a chance to meet with their quality people. Ask them about how they manage incoming quality control. When they get parts, how do they check them? How do they know they're okay? What's their sampling process? How do they? This is their third-party supplier management. How do they do this? This is really important because garbage in, garbage out. If this bad parts are coming in, they're not going to be good when they go out. OQC, you can define how you like them to sample. If they've got some pallets of material, you can say, I want you to take, how many % out of this batch, and they can go do that for you and give you a report. With your predefined test steps, you give them the test steps you'd like them to do. Another thing I look for, stations, do they have the standard operating procedures? Are they up to date? Or are they several years old? A good SOP has some red marks on it cautioning people what to avoid. Do they look like something that works? Now, I'm seeing more and more factories with, big screen paperless systems, which is wonderful because that means it's very easy to keep the documentation up to date. But it's still perfectly fine to have paper on the line. Do they know anything about failure analysis? Or do they just say, we're going to train the operators harder, we're going to train better? If that's the common excuse for a failure, then there's something wrong. There is a reason why something happens. It could be the station isn't set up right, or there's a material problem, there's something. But if you've got several failures and they all are blaming the operators on, needing more training, that's time to look at a little bit more. This one I cannot say enough about, change control. If they change anything on your product, including some of the incoming material location, just the location, even the material is supposedly the same, that's a change. You have to ask this factory to notify you when they change anything on your product. That's something on your initial visit that you need to put in writing with them and talk through it, that you want to be notified of any change. Now, this is one I threw in there as kind of funny, the host belong. Sometimes in China, I would go around to factories and, someone would bring me in and I look at the person who's brought me around and they're English-speaking person who can't really tell me much about the factory. And so, it's pretty easy to see that they don't really work at that company. They're just hired to kind of float around and find, foreign people to take to their factory and show them the factory, but they don't know anything about it. And you can figure that out pretty quickly. You can ask them things like, well, where do you sit? Where is your desk? And who do you know here? Who knows you? And it's pretty easy to see. Nothing wrong with that, but it's still just getting that out on the table. Understand that person who's hosted you cannot do anything about what the factory is doing. They are only there to sell and bring you around and speak English. Factory, I always ask for permission to take photos. I don't just walk in and start taking photos. Ask them, is that okay if I take a photo? Most of the time they say yes. Many times they say no, and I have to respect that. There may be some reason for that, some IP that they want to protect. Also, factories are stable. They like to have lunch at a certain time. They have the breaks at a certain time. They need that. Even though we're on a business trip and we'd like to get it all done and get out of there, they still do need to take those breaks. And you don't want to try to intrude as little as possible so that you can really get a good observation on how things are going. Golden samples. This is another one. I had a cable project in China and the cables got skinnier. The gauge of the cable was thinner because the costs were increasing for the factory and they were trying to save to keep the same cost. And the only way they could do that was use lesser materials. So they had a golden sample that they were supposed to match, but the gauge of the cable was different. So golden samples are nice, but write it down in a spec and they need to give you a report that says they measured it. They measured the whatever it is. It's got to be measurable. It can't be left up to any interpretation whatsoever. I know that sounds strange, but it is the truth. So we are through the introduction. Of course, I can talk for hours about, and I actually think a lot of these guys here on the call can too, talk about going to factories and what kind of horror stories we've met or good experiences we've met. So I just want to open it up and see if anybody has any questions. Questions, comments?
Kara, I just maybe a comment related to bringing somebody along that knows the language.
Mm-hmm.
I've from experience, I know it's been useful to have somebody that knows the language that you wouldn't expect to know the language. In other words, somebody that looks like they're from the United States that speaks fluent Chinese, or more importantly, understands when somebody else is speaking it, because there's been situations where they've made comments thinking that you don't understand what they're saying to each other, and it's good to have somebody there that
It
can
is.
overhear those things.
Yeah, it's really funny because of course I speak, read, write Mandarin, not as good as Sandra because she's local.
Yeah.
But many times they will ask me, can you understand us? And I'll answer them in Chinese. 我听不懂你的中文. I tell them, go ahead. and they'll still keep talking. They see my face and they just can't believe that I can understand them. And so that's fine. That's okay. They don't expect it. And I don't know why, because it's actually becoming very popular for people to, more and more of us are learning different languages, and getting out there. But yeah, it is good to listen in and just observe how things are going. You'll find that it's not all that earth shattering, but just understanding the health of a company, or if they're stressed out about anything, other concerns that are equally as important as the requirements. Is your order stable? So it sounds like you've had that experience where someone was with you that spoke the language and they didn't expect it. Hi, Robert.
Hi. I just had a question. My company is still a very small startup, and we're currently looking at engaging in Italy. But you mentioned some of the things you mentioned, TI and other companies. Obviously, they are on the absolute opposite end of the scale that we are in terms of volumes. So when you showed some of the companies that you're working with, what kind of volumes are we talking about in terms of units or dollars?
It's different. So I would say my best customers selling the $1,000 units, they're each $1,000 each and about 1,000 pieces per month. I have other ones that are in the 1,000 to, I got a socks order for 3,000 pieces that I'm helping with. So, socks versus smart helmets, one's $7, one's $1,000, right?
Right.
It's all over the board, but the same concepts still apply. And people will say, well, you're not big enough to have that kind of treatment or worry about that stuff. But I'm telling you, do it now, because you will grow. And you get to that point and you've got this partner who's been doing whatever they want their way without considering this. And it's hard to change once you're in that relationship.
Yeah, we're in a position where we have a factory visit in October. We made contact in April, and our design, or I should say the design house that would be carrying our products, we're still working on that part, already has a business relationship with the manufacturer.
Okay.
So we're not sure how much we need to intrude on this, because it kind of depends on the nature of our relationship with the design house that would carry the product. But we will be visiting. I want to make sure that I pay attention to the same kind of issues that you've mentioned.
Yep.
Maybe I don't need to worry about it, but I just for my own education.
Just do it. They'll know it. They'll know this stuff. And, they'll tell you, oh, you don't need to worry about that. We're ISO, but just keep your checklist and get expectations out on the table. And they will, believe me, because I've in a situation where a company went from startup to going beyond startup and getting into Series B funding and trying to really grow. And now they've got these suppliers that are used to doing things the old way. And probably what's going to happen will be changing some suppliers out. It's just better to get everything on the table early. And also be careful with your design house controlling your factory options. If you have a design house, be sure that you have access to your factory. They're going to try and stop you from that. But design houses don't know manufacturing as well as factories do. And many times they design something that's very hard to build.
Yeah, we're in a little bit different situation because we're in the luxury goods market, and this company, the design house that we're trying to engage with, has been working with this company, for this manufacturer, for decades. So but beyond what we're doing
Mhm.
this year or next year with these products, we want to be able to send other products through that pipeline and either go into that design house or another. And
Right.
we have several, and our products have a bit of a technology to it, but also
Mhm.
I like the fact that you were dealing with a company that made socks, because
Yeah.
the hardest thing that we found to do was not the electronics. We had a number of companies that were willing to build a PCB with a box around it. It was
Mhm.
all of the metal and the glass and the other more aesthetic components that we, for love or money, could not get someone who was willing to touch it at a good price here
It's hard.
in the U.S.
Yeah, it's hard to do and bring it all together and then keeping it consistent. So you're going to want specs on all those materials so that you can lock them down and make sure they don't change on you between order to order. Now, your design house has a long relationship. That's great. But, then there's also the social responsibility aspect. Like, if you're working with a factory, especially large companies, I know Larry knows this kind of stuff, where you are building a product, you have a responsibility to know the factory is ethical and the conditions are good. There's another reason to go check a factory, that people are being treated nicely, because you get word out there where your product's being built by a sweatshop. It's a nightmare for a company, right?
Right.
A quick check, probably nothing going on, but there should be nothing to see, right?
Yeah. It did keep us out of China. I mean, the pandemic didn't help. We started in
Right.
February of 2020 with our targeting a hospitality market. So it was, we knew we were going to slow play it through the pandemic because there was no market for us, luxury goods market then.
Yeah.
But we didn't feel like at the time we had no confidence that we could navigate the Chinese or overseas factory market without getting messed over.
We actually have a project in China that we're managing remotely, and it's worked. I've learned to cooperate with some of my competitors for quick inspections, but the day-to-day management of the projects, we do that, and it's working. We've learned how to work differently. I used to go get on a plane and go over there and check it myself, but now still managing it with, people who speak the language, and then doing some checks at certain points, it can work. It's the proximity between Taiwan and China makes it convenient. We're the same time zone and same language, so it can work. It's just that my customers mainly are wanting to get out of China, and they say, I get requests anywhere but China. So we're looking at places like Vietnam, which the Chinese are over there too, that's for sure. But there still are a lot of Vietnamese-owned companies. It's in its infancy, but there's a lot of potential in Vietnam and Thailand and India. So we're looking at these other markets. We've got a trip planned to Vietnam the week after next and go check out one of our products. So yeah, it's changing. Used to have to be China, but can be anywhere else now.
Okay, I don't want to keep dominating the questions. Somebody else has got another question. Feel free to jump in, but I did have one more.
Sure.
With respect to these factories, and you mentioned that they have some cases R&D to do. Do you often find that they have at least some capability for development? We have a baseline product that we've developed here, but we may want to modify the aesthetic appearance, or in some cases, scary thing for us is app development. We've done it, but we know that the UX environment will have to change, and it's much better to deal with it at that end than it is here.
Yeah, they have capabilities. They can do it.
Maybe jumping in on top of that, maybe if you've got experience with, some factories where if you engage with them early enough, even before the design is necessarily complete, if they, can provide some valuable DFX feedback.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are. Is we know that rough thing that we did just as proof of concept to show that it works is going to have to change, and it's just not viable to do it here. We had one individual do it, and I'd much prefer to be with a company where if one person's on vacation, it doesn't shut down your ability to make changes.
Right. And one caution, though, if you're having a design change done, pay for that design, no matter how token it is, and get an invoice for it. And in the invoice, it needs to say that you own your design. If you don't do that and they put the cost in the per unit of your product, it seems like a nice idea, but they're owning your design at that point. So make it clear that it is your design and your invoice, the invoice they give you, that you're paying for that design, even if it's a small token amount.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they own it, right? They did it.
Yeah.
Even though it's your product, your idea. So, yeah. So just, and you want it to be win-win for everybody. You want the factory to be okay and be profitable. That way they'll be your partner for years to come. So, well, any other questions?
That's it from this end.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, and thanks for joining. It was a pleasure to talk with you. Really neat questions out there.
Kara, I noticed that you had recorded this. Is the session going to be available for download or free to share? Okay, I know there was a couple of other people in our organization that were interested, but had conflicts and so on.
Okay. Yeah, we'll post it.
Great.
Larry. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Yeah, good talking with you again.
All right, thank you.
Take care.